Warning: the following video may provide evidence supporting truths that you don't want to admit to yourself. Your discretion is advised. Probably the greatest Christian apologist on YouTube, Aaronk 1994, like me, started out as a young Earth creationist on YouTube. And when I say greatest, I'm talking about my opinion that he's the best, not that he has more subscribers or is superior by any objective measure. He has an account called Aaron Refutes Himself, and on that account he responds to some of his old anti-evolution and anti-science videos that he made a while back. I've decided that it's about time that I do something similar. So I've decided to do a video series which will have at least 9 parts in which I'm going to respond to a lot of my old creationist videos. I also know a lot about myself, so I can actually go pretty deep with the personal insults since I'm insulting myself. And that also takes away the moral aspect of insulting. So it's a win-win, baby. Anyways, let's begin with my first video.
Hello there, I am the Puppy Turtle, and this is my first video.
Congratulations! I totally give a crap!
It is a response to an atheist who calls himself Hatred42. It's like H8TRED 42, and he made a video, and I'm going to not really talk much about the contents of the video, but I commented on it, and he responded to the comment. I commented saying I would answer any questions he had regarding absurdities in the Bible, which he had mentioned in the video, and he said to do so in video form, so I'm now doing so in video form. Okay. The first thing that is supposedly, according to him, absurd is the Wall of Jericho. I assume he's referring to its collapse because there's nothing absurd about a wall existing in ancient times. And there is a potential scientific explanation for its collapse. Well, first off, it could have simply been a miracle.
And in fact it was, because the alternative you're about to present is stupid. Well, actually there is a secular hypothesis that, in my view, doesn't overtly contradict the biblical text, so technically it could be true, but it's certainly not what you're about to suggest.
What probably knocked the wall down was the sound waves, because at the end, right before it collapsed, to trigger the collapse after having walked around it for a while, which could have been a test of faith, or maybe the footsteps of 3,000 people weakened a wall that may have already been on its last legs, for all we know.
Looking back, I think this is my second or third favorite thing that I ever said as a creationist. Now, the thing I had in mind was resonant frequencies and the general concept that, soldiers marching in union on a bridge will knock it down. Now, what I thought was that if the ram's horns were blown at just the right frequency, in just the right way, it would match the resonant frequency of the Wall of Jericho and knock it down. That's the idea I had in my head. Not just that the brute force of the shockwave actually knocked it down. Now, this was complete speculation. This was just something I made up completely, because that's what I understood that other creationist apologists were doing, and I assumed that's what scientists did also. They just made things up and expected everyone to believe it. That's why I thought creationism and evolution were equal, because they were doing the same retarded thing. So, I guess I can just refute myself, not on the basis that this is probably physically impossible, but merely on the basis that I provided no evidence for my assertion.
Maybe it was going to fall in a month without their help, and God just had them speed the process along so that it happened at a more convenient timing for them.
Sing it with me. I can has evidence, please, for your assertion.
What probably knocked it down was the sound waves from the trumpet blasts. Right before they knocked it down, God told them to shout at the top of their lungs the a bunch of priests were holding trumpets, and they actually blew the trumpets as hard as they could. Everybody shouted at the top of their lungs, a lot of noise, and that is probably what knocked the wall of Jericho down.
Sing it with me again. I can has evidence, please, for your assertion. If you can't give me evidence and you can't explain why I should believe you, then kindly shut up.
But another thing you mentioned was Noah's Ark. And Noah's Ark, there's two things you could be talking about here, and I will address them both. You could be referring to how did Noah fit all those animals in the ark, and you could be referring to how could water successfully cover Mount Everest. Well, let's start with fitting all the animals in the ark. First off, the size of the ark. The Amazing Atheist actually lied about the size of the ark, said it was 40 feet. Well, let me put it this way, he either lied or he is ignorant. It's relatively inexcusable that he would make a video about that and not know what the size of the ark was.
I actually maintain that the Amazing Atheist does need to plead some pretty substantial ignorance in order to escape having lied about the size of the ark. Now, in actuality, I believe it to have had 0 volume, just like all other non-existent things.
The ark was, according to the Bible, 150 cubits long, but there's a problem. We don't know exactly how long a cubit was. The standard Hebrew cubit after the flood, which may not be the same as before the flood, was 18 inches. Egyptian cubit was 20.6. And since Moses was raised in Egypt, but they're referring to Hebrew, they don't know if it was 18 or 20.6. Or it could have simply been that Noah's personal cubit, because the cubit is the distance from elbow to fingertip. And according to the Turkish government, they actually found Noah's grave. And the skeleton inside was actually 12 feet tall.
I can has evidence polls. Give me some now because I don't like singing like this.
So his cubit could have been 3 feet long.
Can I have evidence now? Come on, I have a little bit of a cold, so it's really not that fun to sing, but you keep on making me. But you keep on making me.
So the ark was huge.
Perhaps, but certainly not big enough to accommodate every species of animal that's ever existed, or a large enough stock to get all of the diversity we've had today, given the speciation events that we would expect to occur in 4,400 years. Speciation events which, by the way, disprove the immutability of species. And the reason that that's a problem is because it's the only way evolution can be impossible, as creationists claim. Either that or a smaller portion of the DNA is immutable, which is what Nephilim Free claims incorrectly, in which case there might be an ability to have some kind of barrier between kinds. But it doesn't work that way. The entire DNA molecule is mutable, meaning that creationists lose.
And also the number of animals. Well, first off, there's no fish on the ark. There's plenty of water outside. And saltwater and freshwater fish could have both survived the flood because, according to most young Earth creationists, the reason that it's even saltwater today, the oceans are gradually getting saltier. The same thing that's making them gradually get saltier is the same reason they're saltwater at all.
It's significantly more complex than simply a gradual, steady increase in salinity like you imply, but nonetheless, what you just said is impossible, because one of the mechanisms that drives increases in salinity when they do occur is evaporation, meaning that water goes away and the salt stays there. If there's no salt to begin with, that process can't increase the salinity of the oceans.
And over 4,000 years, it's proven by science that over 4,000 years, at the rate of that salt is being added, a fish could adapt to that.
Really? That's proven by science? ICANN has evidence polls for your assertions. You just said they were proven by science, therefore you'd better have some peer review.
Also, no bugs. They can survive a flood just fine. They can burrow under the ground. They can get on something that's floating. They don't need a large ark to hold them.
Well, considering that they were under an ocean that would have had to be at least several thousand feet deep, and considering the massive geologic consequences it's supposed to have had, no, I'm sorry, they couldn't have survived just fine.
Also, there's the fact that it would have been babies. It would have almost defeated the purpose to bring adult animals. There's so many reasons to bring babies. They are stronger, I will fall down and get straight back up from a fall that would send my great-grandmother to the hospital. And also, they eat less and sleep more.
Yes, but they require more effort to take care of, especially if they're mammals and not in the presence of the mother. And since it's two of each of the unclean kind, let's say that the big kitty kind is included amongst there. If that is unclean, and if we assume that the clean and unclean rules at the time of the flood are the same as the clean and unclean rules anywhere else in the Bible, it would, then we have a pair of young cats who have no milk whatsoever to eat, and therefore within a year they die.
Which was a big thing. Not to mention the fact that they would live longer after the flood and produce more offspring, which is the reason you brought them.
No, actually, they wouldn't live any amount of time after the flood. They would all die on the ark.
Then there's Everest. Well, here's the thing. It is true that if Everest being covered, there's nothing special about the peak of Everest that makes it being covered the line. But if water got high enough to cover Mount Everest, that's what the problem would actually be. Well, there's two possibilities. One, and I think this is the best possibility, is that Mount Everest wasn't there.
You can't get enough plate tectonic activity to create an entire mountain, let alone an entire mountain the size of Everest, during a single global flood. Because, among other reasons, rocks don't float!
The Bible says that during the last part of the flood, the mountains arose and the valleys fell down.
My understanding is that that's talking about the formation of the earth, the oceans. That's the symbolic account that is referring back to as opposed to the global flood. It's just beneficial to pick an arbitrary Bible passage as a justification for why a certain theory in creation science is true.
Your last objection is, how did they live so much longer before the flood? And you specifically cite without medical care. Well, you look old enough to have passed elementary school, is the point. I'm sure you know, or at least I really hope you know, because it'd be sad if you did not know, that medical care, the quality of medical care, is far from the only thing affecting age. There are two major factors that made them live a lot longer. The first one is diet. We eat, on a regular basis in the United States, people eat from a stock of maybe 30 fruits. Why? Because those are the most delicious fruits. But there are, in reality, 1,000 different types of fruit.
Give me evidence now, or I won't believe you. Why should I believe your lies when I know you aren't telling the truth?
Or at least many hundreds. Some fruits contain distinct vitamins that are only found in that one particular fruit.
Wrong, wrong, wrong.
So, we are deficient in a lot of things that they wouldn't have been. They probably had a much wider variety of fruits to choose from. Today, we are deficient in a lot of things. Lecithin, particularly, comes only from bread made from unprocessed wheat, which I don't believe I've ever eaten in my entire life. And lecithin is responsible for the circulatory system, so by going with such low levels of lecithin, people now get more heart attacks and strokes.
ICANN has evidence polls, perhaps statistics demonstrating your point, if such things are available. If not, there's surely a way to test. Remote farms, come on, give me something, or else I won't believe you. Or else I won't believe you. Or else I will not believe you. Done, done, done.
If you ever heard of the Hunza people, according to actual documents, not just anecdotes, the Hunzas actually lived to be like 160 just because they had such a great diet.
ICANN has evidence polls. You said it was according to actual documents and not just anecdotes. Therefore, you should be able to tell me what those documents are. Actually, I am you, so I know you can't, but any creationist watching this, please back up any of the claims I made before.
The second factor is oxygen. If you've ever seen Jurassic Park, when they drill into the amber bubbles, they can pull out oxygen, and what they see is there's 50% more oxygen than we have today. There's 35% oxygen in those, we have 21 now.
And you realize that's before humans were alive. No, wait, as a young Earth creationist, you don't realize that.
And more oxygen combined with more air pressure. Most creationists theorize that there was a water vapor canopy. It's described as a water vapor canopy. It was probably actually ice, suspended by the Meissner effect.
The Meissner effect is where a magnet floats on top of another magnet. Ice is not freaking magnetic, you moron! I mean, seriously, how anyone ever believes Hovind on anything he says is beyond me, but that one is just. Gah!
Because the theory is that this increased air pressure and that combined with more oxygen made people live longer and get bigger, which explains that 12-foot tall skeleton I mentioned earlier. Not to mention, of course, insects. They would get bigger, which is why we find gigantic insects today. That we find like 15-foot long centipedes, 2-foot long grasshoppers, and also bigger fish. There would have been bigger fish because air pressure puts more oxygen into the water, and that makes the fish live longer and get bigger. Really, everything would live longer and get bigger. That's why we find bigger animals as fossils.
Yes, from before humans were around. But as a young Earth creationist, you of course are unaware of that. Typical.